What's up, everybody?
Welcome to the Soul Anarchist.
The Soul Anarchist podcast.
A show about living life on your own terms.
On your own terms.
Here is your host,
With my boy,
Paul Duane.
There we go. I think it's all on.
Yeah. Cool.
Are you on?
I'm on, I think. Unless I'm not.
Brother Kunz. Yeah. Nice to see you, man.
Yeah, good to see you too, my man.
Nice to see you. We did this what feels like 4 or 5 weeks ago, but it was a year ago.
Yeah, well, I think it was a year ago this month.
Really?
In fact, yeah.
That's uncanny timing.
Yeah, for sure. I've been excited about doing this. I think our first conversation was amazing.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Just making sure that everything's running here. Okay, that looks nice. So, you know, you're one of my favorite people to talk to about love and life and relationship and all those kinds of things. And there's this thing. Well, first of all, it's Valentine's Day.
Right.
Let's acknowledge that right now. When this podcast comes out, Valentine's Day will have come and gone, but this is my Valentine's Day date. Do you have a date tonight?
I don't have a date tonight.
Dude. Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me, Morris.
Yeah, well.
Such a charming guy. What's a charming fellow like you doing without a date on an
Well,
Valentine's
there's probably a lot more that goes into this, but I just haven't been feeling all that well the last couple of weeks, so it hasn't even been a focus for me today. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, you know, sometimes it's just like that.
Just got to lay low.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So-
I saw you're doing a cleanse.
Yeah.
Tell me about this cleanse.
Doing a liver cleanse. I've wanted to do one for a while, and a dude that I follow put one on his podcast just recently, and I listened to that and it inspired me to do it. So, and just coming off of not feeling very well, I thought, you know, now's a great time to do that. So I'm eating really good. Everything I'm eating, putting in my body right now is supporting the liver. So
Nice.
yeah, so I'm looking forward to feeling good.
Is that a lot of quinoa you're eating? Is that what I saw in that picture?
No, it's yellow mung beans.
All right.
Yeah. So, and it's actually really good. Most of the cleanses we do these days, most of it's nasty and you're starving yourself, but this is actually really good and feel good about it. Because I'm eating the same thing for lunch or breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's good. So I look forward to eating.
Nice.
Yeah.
It looked fairly tasty.
Yeah, it is pretty tasty.
Looked like something one of my vegan girlfriends made for dinner one time.
Yeah.
Or during one of her vegan phases.
Yeah, and it is vegan except for the bone broth I put in
Okay.
it. So,
Nice.
yeah.
So when we talk about relationships, there's this thing that you say sometimes that has always intrigued me, and that's our topic today. And it is, and correct me if I get this wrong, but you say essentially that everyone should practice open relationship for what it teaches you about monogamy.
Yeah,
Is that right?
More specifically, I say that I think everybody should consider trying open relationship with radical honesty because of what it will teach you about your monogamous relationships.
With radical honesty.
Yes.
Yeah, because what's open relationship without radical honesty?
Right, because if you're doing open relationships and you're just like hiding out, not really being honest about it, it's not that challenging. It's not, you know, it's anybody can do that. I mean, that's easy, and that's how most people do open relationships.
Isn't that what we just call fucking around?
Pretty much.
Isn't that essentially what that is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Being single?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but there are some people that prefer the don't ask, don't tell. I mean, and that's okay. But if you're in it for growing and learning more about yourself and you're practicing radical honesty, like that's where we get a lot of challenges come up when we know that our partners are seeing somebody else.
Doesn't like don't ask, don't tell, that has to be an agreement too, though, doesn't it?
I would say so.
Yeah. I mean,
I well,
do you? I mean,
who knows? Who knows in the dating scene today? But I think it's best to like have those conversations and decide where you're going to go.
Yeah, get your mic in front of you just a little more there. Yeah.
Okay.
How does that go? You know, when you start seeing someone and it's time to let them know, hey, I practice open relationship. How do you approach that?
It's been different for me as I've learned and moved through. When I very first started practicing this, it was in 2000, right around the first of 2015. And I only did that for about a year, right? And so it, like, I was dating two girls that were into this. One of them, it kind of caught her by surprise, but it was like we had spent a weekend together, and then after the weekend, I mean, it was just one of those romantic love affairs. It was great, and so it was so connected, and she was still reaching out, wanting to hang out, and I told her, I said, look, girl, I've got to have a conversation with you. And so I met her for coffee, and I said, look, here's where I'm at. I'm dating a girl who also has a boyfriend, and when I met her, like, she told me that the only way she was interested in dating me is if I was okay with being in open relationship. And I just come out of a divorce, and I'm like, well, that sounds great to me. That's perfect timing, right? Because I didn't want a relationship at that time. And so I was in that with her for probably about 6 months, and then I met this other girl. And so when we met for coffee, I said, look, here's my situation, and we practice radical honesty. We know where each other is. We know who we're with. We don't hide anything. Everything is on the table. And I said, I invite you to come on this journey with me. And her exact words were, fuck yes. Like, so she was in. But it was like I painted a picture for her of, like, you know, this has been awesome for me because it's all about honesty. And we're just laying it all on the table. So it's and there's something, I think there's something amazing about that, because it's like it gives you a chance to always check in and see where you are inside of the relationship. Because the truth is even in monogamous relationships, we don't always know where we stand.
Right. You still have to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you know, one of the things when I was a Mormon missionary, one of the things that we did was something called companionship inventory, and it was part of the program. And every for those of you that don't know, I'm you know, got to bring you all into the world. So as a Mormon missionary, you have an assigned companion that you live with 24/7. You're with them all the time, and it's kind of like being married. You know, it's a lot like it. You have to work together. You have to get along. You have to do everything together. And anyway, so one of the processes is every Sunday night you do companionship inventory, and that's where you sit down and you talk about the work, you talk about your appointments, you talk about how the work has been going, and then you talk about your relationship. How are we doing? Are we getting along? Is there anything I'm doing that's bugging you? By the way, there's something you're doing that's bugging me. You got to talk to you about it, you know, things like that. Because if this isn't working well, then none of the other stuff would function that well, you know. Which
I think is brilliant.
I found it really challenging. But I found that when we did it, everything went better, and I swear, like I've seen that like both sides of that in regular relationship too.
Yeah, absolutely. In I would say most relationships today, there isn't that open line of communication. Right. People are afraid to bring up the absolute truth. They'll say this, but not that. Right? They'll say things on a daily basis, but when it comes to an emotional trigger or something that's really big, they don't dare tell the truth, right? Because they're afraid of what it might cost them. Like, if I say this, he won't love me anymore. Fear if I loss. Say that, she's going to go. Or if I say this, we're going to be in a big fight or whatever, because in those situations, both parties aren't willing to take 100% responsibility for their own stuff or their own emotions.
Yeah. So what has open relationship taught you about that process?
Well, a commitment that we had with the first girl I was seeing was, our commitment was that we would process through anything, right? No matter what it was, we would have conversation, and we would have conversation until it is resolved, right? And so, you know, without getting into too much details, it's like if she was seeing somebody else that triggered me, or I had emotions come up or whatever, then I would ask her about it. But I also took responsibility for my own self, my own feelings. And so instead of saying, you did this, you did that, I would say, hey, you know, when you do this, then I feel this way.
Right.
And we would have those kind of conversations, and then she could be like, oh, no, not at all. That's not how it is. This is how I feel about you, and this is why I did that, or whatever. and that helps us that helps us stay on track. And the thing that was so awesome about that was when we would process to a resolve, we were in a space where we were so in love, right? It just brings, because it removes all of those barriers that are in the way and all of the second guessing and the wondering where you stand and are we okay and all of that kind of stuff. It gets it out of the way, and then you're completely present with this person that you love, and it's wide open at that point. And when you can make love from that place, talk about great deep connection. It's amazing, right? And so the flip side of that is, the reason that I say everybody may want to consider trying this is because it certainly brings up your possessiveness, your jealousy, your control. Like, and most of that stems from jealousy, right? To know that your lover is with somebody else tonight, it can be quite challenging at times, especially if you don't necessarily like that person, right? Or you might have some, just some triggers or jealousy about that person in general. I had to face a few of my like almost nemesis type of dudes that are in the circles that I run in. Like, I didn't have to face them, but I had to face my demons about them. I had to face my thoughts of like, I'm not as good as them, or I had them on a pedestal, or I was jealous of them. I had to face that a couple of times. That was like some pretty deep stuff for me, and we worked through it. We had the conversation until the conversation was complete. And it was not only transformational for the relationship, but very transformational for me.
How did it change you?
Well, because I got to see that the other dudes weren't any different than me. They didn't really have anything on me, right? I mean, it's like, and that's not what it's about, but that's what our ego wants to talk about. Right? Our ego wants to do comparison and say, oh, they might be better at this. I might not be as good of a lover. I might not be man enough. Or, you know, the ego is questioning all of that stuff all of the time. And then when you can actually have the conversations and actually have some truth come through the other person to kind of let you know that, no, you're friggin' amazing. Right? That has the ability to transform, especially when you're doing it in a loving conversation, in a way that really supports you and lets you know that you are loved when you are facing your demons.
So tell me about a time that happened to you. You can change names and dates, you know, obscure things. But I'm curious about like one of these nemesis guys that you felt really intimidated by. Call him Jim or something. You know?
like when it happened to me, when I had to face that, you mean?
Yeah, like what were you insecure about?
Pretty much what I just said. There was some things about me. I didn't know if I was a good enough lover to be able to compete with the new guy. Right. Because this guy was a guy who, like, every woman I know loves this dude, right? And he has one woman on his arm and he kisses all the other girls as he walks in the door. And I'm like, that was pretty challenging for me, but also it helped me get over the hurdle of knowing that, yeah, I'm okay. I'm, and it's not about competing, but I can hold my own. Right. And not being man enough, like, because women want to be with a man. And so I would question, at times, like, am I man enough to keep a woman that I really love and adore, or is some other man going to swoop in and take her away from me?
What does that mean, man enough?
It is pretty vague, isn't it? But that's what my ego would say. And so
my ego has said the same thing before, but like, what does that mean to you?
Right.
Like,
for me, it's like, am I a good enough provider? Am I strong enough to stand up and call bullshit when the woman I'm with is like kind of going through some of her storms or calling me out on stuff? Am I man enough to stand up and say, no, that's not the truth. This is where I am and this is where I'm going. And man enough in the bedroom. Right. And I think every man probably has had thoughts or insecurities about this at one time or another.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you faced stuff like that?
Oh
as well?
God, yeah.
Just want to make sure I'm not on this island all by myself.
No, I'm there
you know?
with you. I'm there with you. We're drinking margaritas on this island, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there. I have a vacation home on that island.
Yeah. And I think it's part of being alive, being human.
Yeah.
You know, it's like part of the continuous growth cycle that we go through.
Yeah.
You know,
What like how did you break out of the comparison trap?
well, because her and I had a relationship where we could talk about anything, this gets into like something a lot of people probably wouldn't want to go here. But I asked her, I said, will you tell me about your experience? And she told me every detail.
Like the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Like what did he do in bed?
Yep.
What was it like?
Everything. And it's because, and it wasn't because I was in some weird place where I wanted to hear this weird story. I wanted to know because I was in comparison mode.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wanted to know. And then, but I learned a couple of cool things through that. But being able to listen to her and how she felt, and I felt like she was 100% honest with me. Right. And it made me realize that he's a dude just like me.
What did you learn?
And I'm a dude just like him.
You said you learned a couple cool
Yeah.
things as she was hashing out the nitty gritty
Right.
details. What'd you learn?
Right. And that's one of them, that he is just like me and I'm just like him. We're both dudes doing the best we can. He's no superhuman. He's got his faults, failures, flaws, just like I do.
Gotcha.
Right. And I'm like, and he's a good dude. I really like this guy. Right. And the second thing that I learned was the word, is it compersion? Compersion. Okay. So watching her tell me this story, she became like a giddy little girl because it really lit her up, right? There were some things that they had together that were really beautiful, and I was able to drop inside of that with her and be present with her in that moment. And I had no judgment, no jealousy, anything other than love for her and for him in that moment. And it was really weird for me that I dropped into that space because of where the conversation started. Right. And to be able to drop inside of that and just feel the way that she felt, the way he treated her, the way he made love to her, and how it lit her up. It lit me up watching her be lit up. And I loved watching her being in that love space. And I'll tell you what, when you can reach that depth with a person, when you can love them that much and make love to them from that place, that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen or experienced.
I've tasted that before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's an interesting place. I've often wondered what's the difference between compersion and cuckolding. You know, like it's.
Say more about that.
Like the idea of getting off on the idea of your lover with somebody else. Mm-hmm. You know, because there's this other dark side. Right. Where people derive a lot of pleasure from that. Yeah. But I'm not convinced that's always a healthy thing.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Have you seen the dark side?
I haven't experienced it directly, but I've had a lot of I've talked to a lot of people that, like, women will say, yes, my man's okay with me being with another man, but he wants to watch. Right. So there's stuff like that, and my sense of that is it kind of goes into some sort of perversion around that, or maybe it's not perverted. I don't know because I haven't experienced it, but that was just my guess. And there's probably a double-edged sword in that it's not all that easy for the man to watch, but it keeps it in front of him so he doesn't have to guess about it. He doesn't have to wonder about what's going on.
It assures clear communication.
Yes.
It's a control tactic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Interesting.
That's my thoughts around it, but I don't know. I mean, a lot of people would probably have different opinions or theories on that. I just don't know.
So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this too. And if we have any comments or questions on this, we'll try to get to them at the end. I have yet to, maybe this is my own baggage. I don't know. I'm open to that. But it looks to me like in all the data gathering I've done and talking to people and observing, the open relationship is for women, almost always plan B.
I would agree with you on that.
Really?
Yeah.
Plan B. Yeah.
Because they can't find the relationship that they want, but they want some loving.
Yeah.
So
it's a compromise.
Yeah. I would say you're probably pretty right on. I would say as far as the majority goes.
Okay. So that being said, like nothing's black and white, and there is a bell curve, and there are outliers.
Absolutely.
But what we're talking about is most of the time, All right. So how do you feel about that, knowing that most of the women that say they are interested in engaging in open relationship, it's plan B, last resort. It's not what they actually want to do, but it's what they're going to do right now.
Right.
How does that sit with you?
Depends on how I feel about the woman.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh.
It's like because I don't know if you're still into the woman, and if you are practicing open relationship already, and that's where she wants to engage, and she's a woman that you really like, why not? Right? Because if you weren't willing to, it means you are shooting for monogamy, right? Because you want her all to yourself. And so that's the thing. It's like it's so easy to get caught up in, no, you do it this way, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it this way, right? It's easy for people to do that and not be absolute. If there's not 100% honesty in the relationship when you're doing the open relationship, it's easy for people to still hide out, right?
Like, I'll just say, as I think about this, and I'm not going to impose my view on anyone else, but like as I think about it, it's kind of like when you have a lover and you have a sex act that you want to engage in, and it's your thing, but it's not theirs.
Yeah.
We all have our preferences.
Sure.
Personally, if I know that they really don't like doing the thing, I don't even like asking for it.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
because quite honestly, vice versa, like if there's a thing I really didn't like doing, I would kind of like to just not do it.
Right. Yeah.
So that being said, to extrapolate that out a bit, like I would feel kind of weird about being in an open relationship with a woman, knowing that she was just like, well, it's complicated, man. Like I'm wrestling with this whole thing, the ethics of it. That's what I'm wrestling with. Like, is it an ethical thing to then say, well, I know you don't actually want to do this, but we're going to do this. Anyway, and it's kind of like in monetary terms, if we back out a little bit, there's no, as long as nobody's forced into a transaction, there's no such thing as, like in real capitalism, it's all fair.
Yeah.
Like if you laid the money out, you made the decision to, even if it was a terrible idea, even if the price was bad,
right,
for some reason you did it and you get to own that, so like, I'm like translating that ethic over into the relationship and sex world. And it gets a little weird. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's just like anything else. If you're not, I mean, even in capitalism, there are times when people will put the money down, but they'll feel manipulated.
Right.
Right. And so the same could be true for sex or
which is
whatever.
The essence of a lot of the Me Too movement right now.
Yeah.
Like talking about like Louis C.K., his whole thing was he didn't force anybody to do anything. The door was unlocked. Like the people in his situation could have left. He walked out, was like, you mind if I masturbate in front of you? And they didn't say no, you know, but yet they later on were able to come out and be like, I felt like he abused his power. He manipulated us into it because of who he is.
Right.
It gets real weird,
Yeah. And see, again, like, I mean, there's so damn much dynamic in this.
Yeah.
Like, and it's all based on personalities.
Yeah.
Right. Because every single person is different. And so to say that they were afraid of power or whatever, I mean, that can happen in financial transactions, sex, relationship, whatever. And yet the person who feels manipulated, they still chose to stay there. They still chose to be there. They didn't say no. They didn't walk away. But then it goes back to what I was saying earlier about they're afraid of what they would lose.
Right.
Right. So it's like if a man and woman is in a relationship, the man wants to do something the woman doesn't want to do. She does it anyway. She doesn't say no. She goes along with it, but she didn't feel good about it. She feels manipulated or whatever, but she's afraid of losing her man if she says no.
Right.
Right. Then that's like she's afraid of losing something, and yet at the same time she's not speaking her truth. Right. And so this comes down to something that I'm learning more and more and more is like, why would I want to be in any relationship where I can't speak 100% truth?
Right.
And be willing to walk away if I have to. Right. Not try and fit myself in a box because they might get upset or they might not love me or whatever. I'm like, bullshit. I'm not playing in that damn box anymore. No more. So if I can't tell the truth, if I'm with somebody that I can't tell the absolute truth to, why am I with them?
That's awesome on your part. How do you know that you're dealing with a woman who's doing the same thing?
You can't know for sure until she starts telling the truth. Right.
Right. Because it seems like, in these, for this to be anything but really toxic, it's got to be two people who are committed to transparency.
Yeah. And it's certainly a higher level of relationship.
Yeah.
Right. It's not easy because we are taught, especially in our culture right here, we're taught to not rock the boat.
Right.
Right. Be nice, sacrifice, do all the nice shit. And I don't think that works. Right. In relationship. Yeah. I like being kind and loving and yet not very many relationships are kind and loving all the time. I mean, you may have experienced it. I haven't. Right.
Yeah.
And so if people aren't willing to tell their truth, even if it doesn't come out all polished and sweet and all that kind of stuff, but at least be willing to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And talk about it, converse about it. Like if you don't have that in your relationship, what do you really have?
Just a warm body.
Yeah, I mean, you might have some decent sex and warm meal on the table when you get home, or somebody you can go to sleep next to. And you know what? There's so many levels of this, and some people may be okay with that, and I don't want to judge that.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't want to play there.
Yeah.
Right. It's not all that fun to me because I've done the other stuff, and I'm not in any way blaming it on my partners. I wasn't willing to tell the truth. Right. It's a process to get to where you can tell the truth all the time. And it's not about the other person. It's about like working on yourself enough to have the confidence and believe in yourself enough and love yourself enough to be able to say, no, that doesn't work for me. Even when it might mean that you lose the person you absolutely love and adore, but being willing to respect yourself enough to tell the truth.
How did you grow into that? Did you have like a transformative moment, an epiphany? Like, tell me about your journey on that.
It's been quite a journey. I started going down the transformational work trail, I would say 23, 24 years ago. And just because you went and did a workshop or just because you had an experience doesn't mean you'll be fixed next time. You'll do it perfectly next time. It's a learning process, and it's something I was committed to, right? and so if you are not committed to your learning and growth, and you just let the universe haphazardly dish it out to you whenever it shows up, you will still grow, but you won't grow as much as if you were committed to it. And so for me, my lifestyle, when I first found out that I could be different, I could show up differently, I could learn different things about me, I committed to it. I was thirsty for it. I was hungry. And I'm still hungry today, and I've been doing it for almost 25 years, almost a quarter of a century. And every day today, I still reflect every single day. Every conversation I have, I'll look at it and say, what could have worked a little bit better? And I do all of this because I'm selfish. And a lot of people have a negative connotation to that, but I'm selfish in the fact that, first of all, I want to be the very best human being that I can be. Second of all, I want to have the absolute best relationships that I can have, and 3, I want to have the very best quality of life that I can have. So that's the reason I look in the mirror every day. It's not for anybody else, it's for me. And everybody else that I'm around gets to reap the rewards of that, which I'm not saying I'm the greatest human being around, but I'm a lot more pleasant to be around than I was a decade ago or 2 decades ago. And I know I'm a hell of a lot better in relationship than I used to be too, because now I'm willing to be more truthful, more honest. And there are times too that I still trip up, or I might not be willing to go there right now, whatever. And so I just manage it the best that I can and do the best that I can, right?
What's something that scares you into, or what's something that tempts you into withholding your truth and playing small?
I think there are still like some remnants of me from the past being worried about if somebody likes me or not.
Yeah.
Right. And like I'll still catch myself from time to time, but this is something that I was like filled up with when I was younger. Like everything I did was about trying to get people to like me. Right.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that, but that's what I was doing. And so sometimes there are times when I'm dealing with a woman that I might not quite say the truth, or I might just let something slide because it's like, I didn't quite want to go there. I hadn't established a relationship enough or whatever. And so the courage wasn't quite there in that moment. Or maybe I kind of swallowed it because I didn't want to get into that right now or whatever. And yet I want to get better at being able to decide right now it's a done deal no matter what, if I choose. But I think there are some times when it's like, okay, I don't want to deal with this right now, but I will bring this up when the timing is better. Right.
I think that's fair though. Like you got to know your audience and know the right time. Like there are certain times, like if the other person is really tired or really, really emotionally taxed, it's just not going to go as well as if you wait until you're well rested, well fed.
Right.
Hydrated.
Totally.
We do better, when our
Absolutely.
our machine is in decent shape. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's all right.
Yeah. And also like, especially if there's a heated moment or the woman you're with is like really emotional about something, it's not the best time to tell her breath stinks or something like that. Right. I mean, so it's like knowing when to bring it up is also a skill. Right. Knowing your audience. I like that you said that, because it's like if we can get good at that with all of our relationships, not just our romantic relationship, but just knowing our audience and when to bring things up that's the truth, I think it's a lot more powerful and carries more weight than if you just blast people.
My coach will sometimes bust my balls about this because something will come up, in the relationship I'm in, and she'll be like, when are you going to talk about this? Why didn't you bring it up? Why didn't you address this? I'm like, well, because right. X, Y, and Z, like it's usually something like this, like we were drunk or tired, or it was just not all the pieces were in place to have an optimal conversation about like a critical conversation.
Yeah.
And she would often say, like, is this you just coming up with elaborate excuses to not have the conversation? Yeah. And what I found is that sometimes that was the case. I was really tempted to, but other times, I don't know if it's been like this for you, but like if I commit to have the conversation, like I make up my mind in my heart and in my soul, we're having the conversation, so like every time it spontaneously unfolds within the next day or so.
Yeah.
The opportunity shows up, the dialogue happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I have to commit to having it though.
Have you ever had the situation too where you fully commit to it and then the other person brings it up?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Sometimes it's very spontaneous.
Right. Right.
Sometimes
it's interesting, but I think you mentioned earlier triggers versus boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think when we set a new boundary and we are absolute firm on it, everybody else gets it, right? Like it starts to become part of who you are.
Yeah.
And when you make that commitment about no matter what, I'm going to have this, it just puts it in the field, right?
It does.
It just puts it there.
It goes into the ether.
Yeah.
And then it happens.
Right. And we call it forth. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love making those kind of commitments, even when you're a little bit afraid of it.
Yeah. Definitely. Another question for you. I recently read this book, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Glover. Yeah. And he said something in it that, and for those of you who don't know, this is a book about, it's basically a book written to codependent guys who have a tendency to get into toxic relationships. Yeah. And there are these patterns that happen over and over and over again. And I am a nice guy in recovery, for sure. Like this book was written to me, you know, and it's not only, incidentally, it's not only about relationships, romantic relationships. He talks a lot about work and money too. It manifests there too.
Right.
But one of the things he said is that when the sex begins, the learning ends. I'm curious what you think about that.
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
One of my old mentors from several years ago, he used to say, once sex enters a relationship, the growth stops.
Right.
And I don't completely agree with that if both people are committed to still having conversation. Because it's like I mentioned earlier, like, you know, do an open relationship because what it will teach you about monogamy, right? And if we're still willing to have the open, honest conversations, then I think we will still grow. But one of the things that we do see when sex enters a relationship is people will skip past that, have sex, and think everything's great. Right. And so sex becomes the crutch of having those conversations. And so if you're using sex as the default makeup mechanism, I think it robs us of opportunity to be able to grow together as partners. Because I'm telling you, I mean, the more that we can stay clear with each other and be able to express everything and anything that we feel we want to or we need to, and be able to do it in a way that we can have conversation with our partner rather than throwing up on our partner or blaming them for something, it continues to grow the relationship and bring the two people together. But again, if you skip past that and go right to the sex, to the feel good, and then tomorrow everything's okay, but you still swept that issue under the rug, yeah, absolutely right. I don't think you will grow if you continue to do that.
You said something earlier about this particular open relationship partner you had, where you made a commitment to each other to always talk things all the way through. You know, are you still with that person?
No.
Okay, so how did that go? Like, at what point are you in this space where you're like, our commitment is to work everything, you know, to talk everything through, and then not anymore? Like, what was the exit point there?
Well, it was interesting because her and I became primary partners for a little while. And then when I met the other girl that I talked about, I fell deeply in love with this other girl. And she truly wanted monogamy. And so as we were going through the relationship, she started asking me about like being with just her. And I never committed to that. I was considering it, right? Because of the space we were in. I look back now and I think I would have committed from a place of weakness if I would have, because of the way that it was kind of tugging at me, and I wanted to appease her in a way because I really deeply loved her, right? And so I don't think it would have been a healthy commitment for me to go in that direction. So I'm glad it didn't happen. But as I fell more in love with her, then I spent more and more time with her. And so the other gal, we just kind of stopped seeing each other as much, and then she ended up being in a committed relationship with the guy that she was seeing before me.
Oh, okay.
And so we just kind of gravitated apart. It wasn't that we decided that we couldn't talk anymore or whatever. It was just the natural progression of things.
I see.
Yeah.
So with this one partner you're talking about, where she wanted to be in a committed relationship, and you felt like agreeing to that would have been coming from weakness on your part, what would it look like then to agree into monogamy from a position of strength? What is that like?
I think that would have to come from a place of being absolutely 100% clear about it. And not in any way do it for the other person. If we were doing it for the other person, then and it's not 100% true, in that space that I was in, it wasn't 100% true for me.
What would it look like for you, Morris? Like, what would be your reasons that would honor you, that would move you into monogamy? There are so many ladies out there taking notes right now.
So,
I mean, the truth is they paid me to ask you this, but
I hope they paid you well. That's a great question, and it's still a question that I'm currently pondering.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, because the relationship thing has been up for me a lot lately. Really, it's something that's always on my mind, because like this conversation is my absolute favorite topic all the time, and so I love the dance of the masculine and feminine, and so I have been playing into this, and I was thinking that one of the things for this year that I would like to entertain is being in a monogamous relationship with two women, right? Where it's like
a polygamist.
Yeah, something like that.
Get back to those Mormon roots.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And of course that's where I come from, and so I'm conditioned for that.
It's in your DNA.
Yeah, and so I never practiced that in marriage, but I don't fully understand why that calls to me right now, but I would love to be in a relationship with two women and they both know each other and both are friends, and we would have the three of us involved in a lot of activities, like, even public activities or whatever, and just being out front about it, and I know that the main reason this calls to me is because I'm wanting to go back to that place of radical honesty and challenging me to grow more as a human being, right? Being able to talk about everything. And I would actually love it if the two women were able to, like, we could talk about anything and everything between the three of us. Anything, right?
So I'm gonna pitch a tough question at you, sir.
Okay.
Everything that you lay out is steering around being in a committed relationship with one woman. Like, am I correct that there's an aversion to that? Like, you seem monogamy averse.
A little bit, yes.
Because right here you're like, all right, fine, I'll be monogamous with two women. All right, fine, two.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you're absolutely right.
What's the deal?
I'm not ready for that right now. I'm just not in a space where I've been dancing with that for a little while right now, and it's not so much that I have to be in a space where I can see other women. It's more of a space of me not being where I want to be as a man to fully commit to a woman and dance with her in full monogamy, right? And so it's like, there are still some things that I want to accomplish for me before I commit to being there fully.
Like what?
And that could be some stories. Like some of it is financial. Some of it is the new career that I'm looking at launching, which would put me more in these conversations on a regular basis. And I just don't know if being in a relationship right now really serves. And I don't feel like I could give a woman my everything, my all in a monogamous situation right now. So I'm just not attracted to that right now. And would I be willing to do that, like down the road, like a year from now or 2 years from now? Possibly, right? I give it a possibility. I'm not in a space of saying hell no forever. Right. So it's just right now. You're right. It is kind of like I am dancing around it. I'm not willing to dance in it at this moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So one last question. I want to wrap this up. We've been talking for about 45 minutes, which is perfect.
Sweet.
Yeah. What, just to sum up this final idea, and to keep this personal, someday in this version of reality where Morris Kunz finds the woman of his dreams and is the one woman, what things did you learn from Open Relationship? What are you going to bring into that?
Well, going back to what I said earlier about jealousy, control,
Yeah.
and possessiveness, right? I think the more insecure we are, the more we bring that to the table in relationship.
Is there such thing as healthy jealousy, by the way?
I don't like it. Like I just like we all get jealous in one way or another, right?
Right.
To say nobody ever gets jealous, I think would be like going overboard because we're human beings,
Sure.
right? We have feelings, and if we're always learning and growing, we will be put in situations that challenge us,
But
right?
what I'm wondering, though, is there a context where jealousy is a healthy reaction?
I mean, there's sweetness in it, right? It is kind of sweet. But if you look at it, jealousy is selfish, very selfish, and not necessarily in a healthy way,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like that's the desire to put the person in the box, right? And so does it come up? Yeah. The thing that I say that makes it healthy is how are you willing to deal with it, right? Because I've heard several women say, oh, I have a little bit of jealousy, or I like my man to have a little bit of jealousy. It's like healthy. It like shows he cares.
Sure.
I think that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think there's other ways that we can care, other ways that we can show up that doesn't require jealousy, right? I mean, is there anybody out there that is 100% secure in themselves and never has jealousy come up? Probably not very many, if there are any, right? And so there are times when you want to pull your girl closer, right? And there's some sweetness in that, but the jealousy that may come with that, I think if you're not processing it in a good way, which is talking about it and then working on yourself around that, it's not healthy, right? Is it going to show up? Yes. Are you going to process it? I recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we've been talking for long enough here. Thank you for joining, everybody. We've had a lot of good people jump on and watch.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
Any last thoughts? Anything you want to punctuate that we haven't touched on?
You know, the thing that I would encourage everybody to do is always be aware of where you are inside of the relationship when it comes to jealousy, control, and possessiveness, because those three things right there, I think jealousy is the thing that causes possessiveness and control. But those things right there are relationship killers, right? If you want to bring a person close to you, I would never act on your jealousy or try and possess or control anybody, because that pushes people away. And I know that women, there are some things about women where they like to be dominated, they like to be possessed, but I think there's unhealthy versions of that. I know that women like a man that's strong enough to grab them and say, you're my woman. And yet a lot of men can also do that in an unhealthy way that becomes possessive or controlling.
I feel like this would be a good topic for another podcast.
Yeah, I do too.
Jealousy, possessiveness, control.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a fun topic.
That's a whole other rabbit hole. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that before next year.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it sooner than later. So thanks for having me on today, man. I just love this conversation.
Same here. I so appreciate your perspectives, Morris.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Always good to see you, brother.